Okay, thank you. It is Tuesday, May 28th, 2024. It's time for the regularly scheduled city council meeting, and I ask the clerk to certify the meeting members.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Here.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Here.
Thank you. Stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item E is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
point of order, we do need a motion to accept the amended agenda.
that's right.
Mr.
So
Mayor,
changes to the agenda.
I move that we adopt the amended agenda as posted on the internet. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, motion carries. Now we'll move on to item E, the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move to approve the consent agenda as written. Second.
got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, motion carries. Move down now to special business. Item 1, monthly staff reports. These are on page 23 in the packet. If there are questions, you can ask them now or contact the department heads. It's your pleasure. Okay, hearing none. Item F2, development services, notice of decisions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
permission to poll the council.
yes.
Do any of the council members have concerns about the notice of decisions that you would like to have reviewed?
No.
I do not.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the decisions as previously made by staff. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk call roll.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Item Item F3. This is the item we added when we amended the agenda. Colin can brief us on this. It's on here without any particular notice because it's an emergency situation that Colin will explain. Thank you.
Mayor, council members, first off, thank you for allowing this to be on the agenda tonight. It wasn't planned to be on here till the 10th, but the situation was a little more dire than that. So it was great that you allowed us to put this on the agenda this evening. We have a citizen in Garden City that currently is on a septic system, and by city code, they're a nuisance. We don't allow them to connect
options and variety. C2, in fact, already has no minimum lot requirement, nor does many of the other, most of the other cities, other zones. And given that our great city is going through some major changes and growing, I think this will help us deliver to some of the goals and objectives in our comprehensive plan. So a couple of comprehensive plan goals and objectives and action steps. So goal 1 in our comprehensive plan is nurture the city. Objective 1.3 is consider the needs of all citizens, business, and environments. So again, I think allowing more flexibility, less restrictions, less regulation on things like this kind of stuff that limits choice and what ends up being developed in our city. I think that speaks to that. 1.4 is create a premier destination place to live, work, and create. So again, more options of housing, more options of commercial development. Goal 2 is improve the city image. 2.1 is encourage new and distinctive neighborhoods. So theoretically, no minimum lot requirement, no minimum lot size could allow some pretty creative housing developments. And we do allow housing in our C1 zone through conditional use permit. And 2.3, promote quality design and architecturally interesting buildings. Goal 6, diversity of housing. 6.2, continue to be a leader. And I believe this in spades that we are, but continue to be a leader and set an example for the region in creating diversity of housing. 6.3, maintain diversity of housing, specific action steps. 6.3.1, provide for a variety of housing types in the land use code, including smaller cottage and second housing units. Allow for housing that attract niche markets such as senior housing, live work structures, and cooperative housing. Finally, goal 7, connect the city. Redevelop Osage and Stockton streets as shared mobility corridors that are attractive for pedestrians and bicyclists while maintaining access to local businesses. Consider the opportunities for an art pathway and one-way direction for each street. So one thing I haven't mentioned yet is C1 is really actually a rather small zone in our city. It's basically Chinden to Osage and Stockton. So it runs the length of Chinden, or about the eastern half of Chinden, up to Osage and Stockton, south of Chinden. And then where the Walmart is also C1. There's probably a couple of other little parcels. Oh, the Riverside Hotel is C1. So it's not really, as far as a percentage of our city, as far as how much land the city takes up, it's not a big zone, but nonetheless an important one. And that's my quick little speech on that. So again, reducing the minimum lot size to 0 in zone C-1 and setbacks, side setbacks to 0 feet from 5 feet.
Say that first part again, Kent.
There would be no minimum lot size requirement.
Like 0 requirement.
Yeah, which we do have in I think most of our zones in the city. Let's see.
Jenna, would you come up just to be available for questions, please?
So the only zones that have a minimum lot requirement are R1, which is rural, 1 acre minimum lot size. R2, 6,000 with an asterisk to 5,000 if there's a shared driveway or an alley load. And then the last one is C1, has a 3,000 minimum lot area. So R3 has no minimum lot size, R20 has no minimum lot size, and C2 also has no minimum lot size. Mixed doesn't as well, nor does light industrial. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No, I'm interrupted you. My apologies. The NeighborWorks projects that were put in, they weren't in a C1 zone,
Mayor, no, they were not in a C1 zone.
but those were individual small lots. Yes.
Mayor, those are on individual lots. I'm trying to picture any of them in my head. It's been a minute
Yeah.
since we've had any of those.
Yeah.
But they are, if I remember correctly, they were just very small lots for the unit themselves, and then it's shared.
Yeah, shared
open space.
Yeah.
Thank you for pulling the zoning map up. So the red, the dark red is C1.
Gotcha. Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
So-
You guys go ahead.
Yeah,
Just have a
so,
quick discussion.
Counselor, what was just curious more than anything, what was the genesis of you wanting to make this request? Did a developer ask you? Is this something that you noticed from other cities, or what prompted your interest?
So, I guess my answer to that is I've always been kind of a deregulator. I think it's fundamentally mistaken for there to be regulations that limit product choice. So I don't think it's the right thing for us to limit product choice. And I think we are effectively with the minimum lot size. You know, some developer, I have no idea. I don't have a developer's mind, but maybe somebody can come in and have really small lot sizes, go up 3 stories and still have a 2,000 square foot townhome. Something like that. So without having a large yard that maybe a home buyer may not want.
Is there any
So it just allows more
I
flexibility.
get it. Is there any downside to, and this might be a question for Jenna too, is if you have no, is there any downside to too small is too small? I mean, where it's like, well, we're gonna put something that's a postage size stamp, on, I mean, like I don't know, teeny house might not be a good example, but even extreme version of that, right? Make it, and then it's like, well, that really might not fit in with what we want in this city in terms of a certain level of density or height for that matter.
Right.
It's like, well, that actually is a little, I'm just curious. I don't know how that works in practice, and that might be something that
And I
can help.
I think-
Is there a risk there?
don't think so, because again, C2, which is the pink, it's huge. It doesn't have a minimum lot size. So I don't know if Jenna's had
Is there any downside?
to deal with that, like people wanting.
Well, we
Um,
have minimum requirements for a residence.
Okay.
They have to have a kitchen, they have to have
Right.
bathrooms,
So
they
that
have
will
to have,
dictate size to some extent.
to some extent, and that I think impacts, they have to have a place to park, I believe, a garage. So there's minimum elements to the structure.
So there's other requirements that actually force that hand.
So, an example that comes to mind, there's a project in Boise on Washington Street called Washington Square. And they're townhomes, and you can put them on 40-foot wide lots,
Okay.
and they're attached. And there's 0 setback, obviously, because they're attached units. There are zones that have 20-foot wide lots, and you buy as many lots as you need to build. Right now, this is decades ago.
Mhm.
So, I'm not proposing one thing or another. It's just information that part of the issue I think you're bringing up was dealt with in the minimum improvements you have to have for it to be a residence. So that would exclude a tiny home.
Mayor, members of the council, the only thing I can think of, and I haven't seen it through the subdivision process, it's more through when right of way is taken, is the remnant lots that will be created sometimes. And sometimes those can be small enough that maybe it would be very hard to utilize them, certainly not for a residential, but for a commercial venture. But saying that, I've been here for a while now, and I've never seen anybody propose that in a subdivision ordinance or subdivision process.
I'm not sure, don't let me misrepresent you, council member, but I'm not sure. We just I think we want to take the temperature. I guess a little bit. Is that accurate? Yeah.
And I heard you say that, you know, the idea is to allow for people to be creative, and to, by not regulating that, to kind of open up that creativity in, I guess, just to play devil's advocate, Councilmember Jacob said, you know, could you imagine harm coming from this? And I guess, could you imagine housing so small that it's really not suitable and perhaps even predatory in nature?
I could not. Excuse me, because I think, to the mayor's point, we do regulate basic necessities. And I think that's proper to regulate. And I don't think it'd be predatory because, so I'll just back up and say that I think it is appropriate to obviously regulate, you know, some things that are in each dwelling unit. We require kitchens, we require whatever, those things. And that's obviously important because, you know, we're a modern society. We need, you know, human beings need to have these basics, okay? But I think that those things can be, all those things can be accommodated in smaller lots. And I'm trying to, I guess, create an environment which could, through market-driven forces, create more affordable housing, because they're not having to, you know, purchase a minimum 3,000 square foot lot, or maybe be 4,000 or 5,000 based on the requirement. So,
And the zones we have that require that minimum lot size are not suitable for that type of inventory?
no, I think they are. I'll be perfectly honest. I didn't think that there would be that would be a battle, I think, to get that amended in the code. Here, I don't think it would be. So like R2 has the 6,000 square foot. That is Northwest Garden City, Riverside Village, I'm thinking Lakeview, and then of course Plantation too. Thank you, Jenna. R3, which is the far northwest section of Garden City, already doesn't have it. So that's kind of a good question, I think, to highlight. That part of the city doesn't have it, and that's really is single family residential, except up near State Street. I forget what the name of that small little neighborhood there is. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Councilor Rasmussen?
Yep.
The one, I mean, concept, the one thing that I think now that I look at the map is, I can't imagine having that type of development right on, because that zone is right on Chinden. And so to have these little tiny lot sizes, the length of Chinden Boulevard. Now off of Chinden, to me, it makes sense, and that's your C2, right?
Mhm.
Where we have diversity of housing and things like that, but I can't imagine having no lot requirements on Chinden Boulevard itself, where we have all of that kind of commercial work, and then just having, you know, slices, potentially just slices of little tiny things going down the length of Chinden Boulevard. I don't know if that's the look we would want for Chinden Boulevard. So to me, it's not necessarily that I'm opposed to zero lot lines or zero lot sizes. It just seems like potentially an odd place to have no minimums that border right on. So you could have a Barnett Stagecoach and then have right next to it these little tiny, I mean, I don't know aesthetically for the long-term development of that transportation corridor bordering Chinden, if that would be appropriate. So that'd be the only hesitation I'd have, is like, is that really what we want for Chinden Boulevard, to have no lot minimums on that major third floor, which is kind of designed probably for more commercial and that type of work versus these little tiny things going down the length of it. And then off of Chinden, it already is C2, and there's no restrictions where we would have those housing and things like that. So I guess my point is, I'm not sure we need to make a change, given, I think a decision is what do we really want Chinden Boulevard to look like, and we want it to be able to be carved up in little tiny lots like that, right on Chinden Boulevard. You know, and I just noticed that kind of looking at that, oh, that would be weird to have that on, that might be the only hesitation I would have is that.
And I agree. I mean, what do I know? But I mean, what a developer would think if we made this change. However, I'm mostly referring to Osage and Stockton. When we talk about housing, I think Osage and Stockton, based on, you know, what we want to see happen with those two streets, and this zone goes up against that. That's mostly where my head is at.
So if it's off of Chinden, I don't know about, that might be more clear to me, but on bordering Chinden Boulevard, I don't know if would be in favor of that.
Yeah, I wonder if
That's just my two thoughts on that.
I wonder if like, if you guys are gracious enough to consider this, I wonder if like the code could be written if it gets to that point. That we're just talking, we could limit it to, they're not changing the zone, but we're just talking about Osage and Stockton and then Chinden, it wouldn't apply or something.
That would be a question for Jen.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
what you think, council member.
So
About that.
I understand that your focus is Osage and Stockton. For a minute, I just want to talk about Chinden. With a no limit lot size, it would make sense that we would see smaller lots because that has the appeal to affordability, which is why you're proposing this. I worry about homes that don't have a yard or a green space, right? Because it's not required. I mean, a kitchen and bathroom are or whatever, but right, no requirement for a yard or a green space, and so Chinden becomes the place you go to walk your dog or get exercise, right? And it's busy, and we all, I think, lose sleep at night worrying about somebody being hurt on Chinden. And so, and you know, I just I guess I bristle a little bit at the thought of homes lining Chinden. Stockton and Osage, I'm more open to that idea for sure. My last comment would be, I don't want to be just all negative, but yeah, so I'm personally a pretty big fan of planning, right? And I appreciate deregulation is a passion of yours. I think that good planning comes kind of a stepsister of that is regulation, right? What can be built there is regulated. That's part of the plan, and that's how a plan develops. It is interesting that you found the comprehensive plan as a way to support that, because it's I think that could be argued either way, respectfully. I don't know. I definitely think Teresa should be part of this conversation, because this is a big thing, right? I mean, really, in my opinion, pretty, I guess we have zones that aren't. So maybe I'm worried about nothing. I mean, to your point, and I think that's a valid point.
Yeah.
So I guess, have you heard of, or are you aware of a situation where people are looking to make more of Osage or Stockton for housing, and our regulations stand in the way of that?
I have not.
Is would be rezoning Stockton and Osage? an option or not, Jenna?
And Mayor, and that's funny.
there-
Just had a side conversation about that. Certainly, the city could choose to proactively rezone certain properties. That has its own separate, very different lift to that, where the city would have to go out to those property owners and ask if they'd want to be proactively rezoned. And if that was the case and they did, that's not too difficult. If the city really wanted to push it and they were opposed to it, that would be a different scenario for sure.
That would be basically taking those streets and moving them into C2.
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, that's as I understood it. The question.
Of course, we don't have Charlie here, but I could anticipate a memo on spot zoning. I think I've read it before. We all have. And I forget what the criteria are, right? But there's a test. And I think Charlie would remind us.
He
of that.
texted me the recommendation.
And I'm here listening.
There's a guy you're on, Charlie.
To that test, this map up here actually shows the comp plan zoning designations as well. And then the green is the Green Boulevard corridor. And so that is test one. Is it supported by your comprehensive plan? And then all of that purple around it is mixed use residential. And then the gray that you're seeing is light industrial. And then I won't go into the rest. And then the other is if it's giving specific benefits to a certain property. And so that would be the second criteria to look at. That the other properties surrounding it wouldn't have.
And one thing I was kicking myself under the desk up here is I didn't do. One thing I think would have helped if I'd have done a little bit of research to say, hey, what are some cities that have done this and provided some examples for the mayor and city council. But I didn't do that. But if we talk about this again, I would do that with Teresa.
At first blush, I'm with Councilmember Page. I'm not opposed. It's just those lots that were Chinden Boulevard. To me, I envision Chinden Boulevard being more kind of a full commercial zone, like with the Barnett type stuff, you know, the length of it, and some of the big lots that are empty there right now, you know, not being these little tiny things bordering the boulevard, but you know, setback, maybe like you said, also do. That's to me is not a big of a deal, but if they face Chinden, I don't know if that's kind of what I would be interested in.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just not probably appropriate to have zero minimums that face Chinden Boulevard. But step back, yeah, to your point, maybe look at that. Right up,
Mayor, council members, if I may, should the council choose to move in that direction, I do want to point out that any splitting of the lots would have to go through the subdivision process. And so it would have a review criteria that would have to go through and be approved by this board.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I don't have the mind of a developer. Again, I'm just trying to create a little more flexibility in our code in a city that's changing rapidly. I guess I would be surprised, but again, that's I don't have the mind of a developer, but I would be surprised if a developer proposed, if Jenna got an application for somebody to put row homes right on Chinden. I mean, it could happen, but
kind of like an 18-story building. No, I mean, you just don't know, right? I mean,
And if it
that's
did
kind of
happen,
my point. Until
would we
someone
stop
comes up
that?
with it, you don't.
We-
think it'll
yeah, we
ever
probably
happen. That's all.
Good, wouldn't it? I mean, it'd go through the CUP process.
Sure, okay.
Which of course is a P and Z decision item. But
Well, it's certainly something we can discuss when Teresa gets back from jail. I mean, there's not a particular sense of urgency. I
Right.
guess. Yes,
Right.
so, uh,
I would say hats off for being creative
Yeah.
with, I mean, that's novel.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't realized that potential.
And again, I would just emphasize, and you know, it's been said a couple times already, but that much of our city already doesn't have minimum lot size requirements. So yes, this is along Chinden. And so that does raise a lot of questions, I suppose, but I don't think we've seen a lot of instances of people wanting to put in housing on 500 square foot lots or 800 square foot lots or whatever. But
This doesn't surprise me. You
We-
don't think
we-
people come up with whatever.
we did turn down an apartment complex that fronted right on Chinden. I can't remember when that was, Jenna, a few years ago. Over safety concerns, you know, school age kids having to catch the bus, the bus stop on Chinden, that kind of stuff. But, so it can happen.
Yeah, well, like Lisa was showing a picture, like if you go up into Boise and on U-Stick and things like that, there are houses that border those streets, but those streets aren't Chinden Boulevard. You know, they're not 4 lanes, they're not the high, 100,000 cars a day or whatever, the volume of traffic is just, it's just different. So it'd be interesting, I'll have to drive down and look, but I just can't imagine that happening on Chinden Boulevard. But back, I think it might be a good idea. Like to drive down there.
Mr. Mayor, can we,
Interesting.
can we have this item as on the agenda again, if it's
Sure.
appropriate for you?
Sure.
Just so that we can, we're missing a fourth of our council members today.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it's a good idea to bring it up.
It's fun to kick the tires a little bit.
exactly.
We'll be creative.
And the last thing I'll say on it is I really did have my mind around Stockton and Osage. So when I thought of this, it's not really Chinden, but mostly knowing what our vision is for those 2 streets. I felt like we needed to boost some and maybe or try to boost some activity happening on those streets.
No, to Jenna's point, that might be something where we include those 2 streets into C2 and leave C1 still right along Chinden.
Yeah.
Leave it alone, right? So it might be.
We,
different options.
we can do some checking on whether we can have different requirements for different sections within a zone, which would probably be a lot easier.
Yeah.
So I think when we visit about it again, we have Councilmember Jorgensen with us too. If the council wants to explore some specific changes to the regulations on Stockton and Osage, and that can be described in some fashion that identifies how deep and how far from Chinden. I think that's something that we could probably, once council says this is what we'd like to do, if you make that decision, then we, as staff, figure out how best to do that.
Would that be like an overlay district, for lack of a better term, almost?
I don't know. I think at this point, the council says we want to convert some of the C1 to C2 type regulatory encumbrances on Osage and or Stockton. And we want to, I'm making things up now. We want it to go back 100 feet from the center line of Stockton and Osage. And in that area, you don't have a size, you don't have a setback, and you don't have a minimum loss, and then we figure out how to do it. I don't want to ask Jenna to try to figure that out on the spot, although I'm getting some body language that indicates that's doable. So that's what this means, I think. So I think the decision is a policy, what do you want to do? And when you make that decision, we will figure out how to get it implemented in the most efficient way possible. Yeah, the rezone is a possibility, but I think that's a lot more cumbersome than something else and so.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, thank you again, Mayor, for adding this to
Oh,
the
my
agenda. and
pleasure.
Thanks for the conversation to, my fellow council members too. So, thank you.
You bet. And thanks for bringing it up. This is the way we ought to have lots of ideas that make sense. I want the council to feel free to let me know and there's no reason, unless you want to discuss deposing me, I think I'll put it on the agenda. I might even put that on the agenda. I don't know. So anyway, thank you. And just let me know when,
Okay.
and we'll pick a time when Teresa's with us and we'll,
Might be July.
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be July. Yeah. Or whatever works. Okay, there's nothing else on that?
Nope.
Okay. That concludes the business on our agenda for this evening. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I'm to adjourn the meeting.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.
Good, Charlie.
He's gone.
Good night.
We expect you to be the high scorer.
Well, it got rained out. Saw that and it got rained out. So I'm sitting out here at the park and it's all dry now, but it has rained out. So bummer. But thank you for the accommodation, Mr. Mayor.
Well, you're welcome. You're there. You might as well practice a while.